Welcome everyone to another episode of Is It Observable? It's the main objective of Is It Observable is to provide tutorial on how to observe a given technology. Today you are watching one of the episodes of the Kubernetes series. We already have several ones. We had one dedicated to collect metrics in a Kubernetes environment. The second one we were talking about logging, so how to collect logs from a Kubernetes cluster. And during this episode, we're using Loki and their default a log collector and forwarder named Promtail. Today episode, because logging is a very huge topic, we will dedicate this episode to one of the most popular agents of the market. I'm referring to Fluentbit. Correct. All right, so what are you going to learn out of this episode? So first, presentation of Fluentbit. And you will see that there are different things related to Fluentbit itself, the configuration. And also last, before we jump to the tutorial, I think it will be very beneficial for everyone that we see the differences between FluentD, which is very popular, it's the big brother of Fluentbit, and Fluentbit. And then, of course, we will jump to the tutorial. So in the previous ones, we had already deployed a cluster with an application, with Prometheus and Loki to get the logs. So now we were gonna just simply replace the default agent Promtail by Fluentbit and see how the logs are structured in Grafana. And then what is really important in this episode is the configuration of Fluentbit. You will see there is so many things you can achieve with Fluentbit, so it makes sense that we spend more time today in this tutorial to configure Fluentbit to be able to send not only log streams to Loki, but to Dynatrace as well. You'll see you have several things to consider to properly configure Fluentbit. All right, so let's start with the first part of this episode, Fluentbit. So let's see Fluentbit. So Fluentbit is a logging processor tool. It's part of the big family of the log agents, collector, and forwarder. So we already explained the value of logs in the observability world. Just to resume it, it extends our capacity to analyze our data and troubleshoot. In the previous episodes, we were mainly talking about how to collect application logs. But there are also logs and solutions that are also generating logs in our environment. So we're using database. So database will generate logs. There is system log as well from our operating systems. We have the web server logs. We have the access logs. And yeah, depending on the technology that you're dealing with, there's a big chance that it will generate some logs as well. So it could also make sense and beneficial for us to collect not only our application logs, but also logs coming from those components. So collecting all the logs and correlating them is very important to understand precisely what is currently happening in our environment with the right context. Remember that. Context is crucial because it will help us to correlate. So Fluentbit, of course, will be able to collect logs from various sources, from our pods, like explained in the previous episode, and also from servers. Similar to Promtail, Fluentbit can also collect metrics from our Linux environment. So, and others as well, by the way. Fluentbit could be used in a traditional server, could be also used in a VM environment, containers, and Kubernetes. So, like explained in the previous episode, so we expect from Fluentbit to collect our logs, to add the context to it, label, process and transform the log streams in a key value pair format, and then once it's been transformed, we can send it forwarded, in fact, to a log storage solution. So there are plenty of solutions that will allow you to store your logs. So Elasticsearch, Splunk, Kafka, Loki, and Dynatrace as well. The Fluentbit is the most performant and lightweight log processor. So what do you mean by performant? Think about it. We are going to use a solution that's going to stream, collect logs from various sources, transform it. It could basically generate a lot of overrate there. And more logs you have to deal with, where more overrate you can observe. So Fluentbit has been basically created to high-scale environment and to basically be the most lightweight log processor of the market. So Fluentbit is the little brother or sister of FluentD. So FluentD is obviously the most popular solution of the market, and because of the high number of plugins they are out there. So like his big brother, he took the same approach by utilizing a lot of plugins. So when you build a pipeline so pipeline is the way of how you're going to ingest the logs and transform it, you're going to utilize several plugins. So first, you have the notion of input. So as an input, you have input plugins that will help you to collect logs from various sources. So it could be, and also transform into a metric. So you can have plugins to collect stats-D metrics, collect D, CPU metrics, there is disk IO, Docker metrics, Docker events, HTTP, you can query an HTTP endpoint, tail, which is very popular, network, and so on and so forth. Then, once you have collected, you want to parse the data that you just collected. So that's usually the second step of your pipeline. There are also a lot of plugin available out there. So you have, of course, JSON, because JSON is going to be heavily used in logging. You can have the regular expression to transform. You have log format, which is also a standard format for logging. And you're also going to decode some values out of your log stream. Once you have parsed your logs, you want to filter. So filter will allow you to modify, to enrich, and drop information from your logs. And similar to the other steps, you have a lot of filter plugins available. So you have expect, you have GeoIP filter, you have grep, very useful, Kubernetes. You can also have the record modifier, the writer tags, throttle, nest, and modify. So throttle, by the way, we're gonna see it during our tutorial, and a lot of other filter plugins you will see, because usually when you have some logs, you have to transform it to the right format of your log storage. Keep in mind that. There's another filter plugin that is very interesting. To be honest, I've never used it, to be honest. It's the LUA script. So you can basically create a script in an LUA format. And why can you build your own scripts? Simply because sometimes you want to anonymize the data. So here is an example of LUA script. And this one will basically replace one of the records with another value. So then you will anonymize the sensitive data out of your log stream. Then you have the routing. So routing, I will call it output. Because basically, once you have transformed, collected, you want to send it to an output. But what is just amazing with Fluentbit is you can plug several outputs to your pipeline. So, and we'll be in charge of storing the log stream to various data source. And you could basically say all the logs coming from that tag will go here and the other one will go there. So you can have lots of advanced rules to decide where you want to send your logs to. So similar to the other type of steps in your pipeline, Output has tons of output plugins available. So you have Loki, you have Azure Blog, you have Azure Log Analytics, you have Google Cloud, BigQueries, Elasticsearch, stdout. You will see we use stdout, by the way. InfluxDB, you can store it in a database as well, Stackdriver, HTTP, and so on and so on. So to resume, we have input plugins that will be in charge of collecting the data on a specific source and transform it. Then you have output plugin that will send the log stream on the desired format of the selected solutions. In fact, desired format. You will use, of course, parsers and filter to build the desired format. So Fluentbit could be deployed with the help of a Helm chart. This is how we're going to deploy it. And technically behind the scene, you will have, of course, some roles and everything, but you will have a daemon set and a configuration file of Fluentbit that will be stored in a config map. The configuration file or the config map has, of course, several sections in it. So you will basically define your pipeline. So input, the parser, the filter, and the output. So basically, you build your sequence of steps that will define how you want to transform, collect, and send your data to your data source. And by the way, there is a very nice solution out there that we're going to use for the tutorial, and that it helps you to configure Fluentbit. It's called Calyptia, and here is the URL. You can utilize it. It will provide you a visualization of your configuration. So basically, you put your configuration file, you can change it, and that will help you to validate your syntax and visualize the pipeline that you have built. And you have plenty of examples, by the way. So why is Fluentbit so powerful in a Kubernetes environment? Well, the cool feature is that you can directly add annotation on your deploying files. That will allow you to precise to Fluentbit what type of parser you should use to collect the data from that particular pod. The plugin architecture makes Fluentbit more powerful and more customizable. I mean, compared to Promptel is a great solution, but it's much more simpler to configure the transformation of your logs, to be honest. It supports also a lot of security concepts, especially on the output plugins, because at the end of the day, you're going to transform, collect a lot of sensitive metrics, and then you want to send it somewhere, and you want to make sure that there is no security issue when you're sending that data to your storage. So what is the difference between Fluentbit and FluentD? Fluentbit's advantage is the fact that it's way much lightweight compared to its big brother, FluentD. So FluentBit is about 150k kilobytes, and FluentD is about 40 megs. So FluentD has been highly optimized at low cost to basically be designed to run in a very high-scale environment with a lot of log processing. So it's been clearly designed for Kubernetes, where you know that you're gonna have lots of nodes, potentially lots of pods running there, lots of components that generate logs. So it could generate tons of logs. So it's been clearly the design for Kubernetes. You can also combine the usage of Fluentbit and FluentD for complex pipelines. You can imagine that you use Fluentbit to transform most of your logs and you forward it back to FluentD, and then FluentD will do the rest. And maybe you don't want to build or complexify your process, so you want to take advantage of a FluentD plugin, so it makes sense to first do the job with Fluentbit and then just utilize FluentD just to send the logs to your data source. All right, so we pretty much explained everything today. So let's jump to the tutorial.
Every tutorial of Is It Observable, you will have a dedicated GitHub repository for the episode. So here we are looking at the episode related to Kubernetes and Fluentbit. And you can basically follow this tutorial at home at your own pace. And also, it will be great to get your feedback out of those tutorials. Otherwise, in this tutorial in the GitHub repository, there are a lot of steps that we are not going to do today because we already have done it on the previous tutorials. So we already have a cluster with Prometheus installed. And I just freshly removed low-key with Promtail. And now I just want to install low-key with Fluentbit, so we can see the differences directly in Grafana. All right, so first step, let's open a terminal. Here it is. And we are going to basically install low-key. So here in this installation, I have set Fluentbit enabled true and Promtail false. All right, so let's run a kubectl to figure out if we have all our pods running, which is the fact. We can see that low-key Fluentbit is running. In fact, it's a version of a Fluentbit that has the low-key output plugin pre-installed. That's make the specific image for this pod. So now we have everything. So let's jump into our Grafana. And we don't have to reconfigure Grafana because we already have the data source low-key that we have defined during our last tutorial. So what I would like to do here is just to simply briefly explore to show you the differences that we had with the Promtail agent. So here, if we look at it at the first, we have a bit less labels that was added by the Fluentbit job. But again, those labels could be adapted depending on the configuration of Fluentbit. So we are going still wants to look at the hipster shop, which we do here. So we have our logs, and similar to the other day, we could also grab one of the logs that we'll be interested to collect, especially, for example, one with some information. So here, for example, we have this the similar logged stream that we were looking at on the other session. Now we are looking at through the same stream, but collected through with Fluentbit. So let's adapt the filters. So here, what I would be interested in is basically to grab the front end service. So we're going to add this filter here. And what is also interesting, I didn't mention the other day, is you also, so now we have the filter added, and let's look at if any other filter that could help us to query the data that we would like to get out of this logql. So first we have the severity. So let's do similar to the other filter we did the other day. I'm going to add a pipe. The pipe, remember, an equal means it says the log stream contains a specific character, a specific string or text. So here I'm saying debug, which is because I'm interested in the debug, like we mentioned. Let's run that query. So you can see here debug has been filtered. So now we have a bit more things related to what we're looking at. And you can see here there is some show context. I didn't tell you the other day, but here if you click on show context, it's going basically to select all the log stream related to that time frame. So everything that happened before and after. So then you can understand if any events or any behavior that could happen from various services or various components of your application. So here you can see that we have this the similar things that we can achieve. So basically the difference is you don't see major difference between how the log streams are being collected and stored in low-key. At the end of the day, here we're using logql to display information. So then you can basically play with all the various functions. Let's say here, I'm interested. So let's say JSON. And let's say we are interested in looking at the HTTP RESP. Remember, the JSON will convert we will get the various payload of your log stream that is stored in the JSON format and get those attributes and convert them into labels. So all the dots will be replaced by underscore, so RESP. And then let's say we want to look at the RESP status, and it's 500. So let's put 500 like this. And let's run the query. So now, by doing this, now I'm looking at only at the status 500. That Fluentbit is doing the same job. It collects the log streams, but then once it's stored in low key, then you can basically do whatever you want with. We are basically gonna remove it. So let's do just an install low key. It's the name of the name of the release I gave to Helm. So now it's gonna remove everything. And now if I do a just get pods, you see that all the various components related to low key would be removed. Now we are going to install Fluentbit and look at the various aspects of the configuration. So first, one thing that I'd like to highlight here is you have various ways of installing Fluentbit. Of course, I would recommend to look at the documentation of Fluentbit, where you can see all the steps. And here in our case, we would be basically interested in installing it into with the help of a Helm chart. So let's open back the terminal, and I just want to do is basically copy this one and install Fluentbit in this cluster. So now let's have a look at the pods that we have. So we can see that we have our 3 pods that has been deployed through our daemon set. Fluentbit is configurable through the config map. So let's have a look at the config maps that we have here. And the one we can see here, we have Fluentbit. So let's look at this one. And now you can see our config map. And like I explained in this the first section of this episode, we will find here the various steps of our pipeline. We have a tail, so he will basically grab the logs from the as desired folder where we have the container logs. And here it also take the systemd information, and then we're going to filter Kubernetes by adding some labels there. And then we have an output defined at the moment, which is by default. It seems that we can see, if I'm not wrong, it's Elasticsearch. All right, so now the exercise that I would like to do here, of course, is to slightly change the log stream that we are able to collect in order to send it to the Log Ingest API of Dynatrace. So the first thing I need to do in this steps here, I want to show you that in order to debug your pipeline, I would recommend to do std out. So std out of your the pods of Fluentbit, you will see the various log streams appearing. So it will be a way for you to figure out if the transformation that you have applied is doing like expected. So here I'm going to do a format. So there are several formats available: JSON, JSON lines, JSON streams, and there's also a log format. But here in our example, I know that the Dynatrace API wants some JSON payload, so I'm going to use the format JSON. Then the key related to the timestamp, because at the end of the day, we're going to send it on the desired format. So let's remove this line here and copy paste. I'm just going to copy paste the key JSON date key here, timestamp. And the other one is, could be also pretty much relevant, is the precising how the format of the date. So here you can put a date formatter if you want. You can look at the logs of the documentation of Fluentbit, but here date format, which I'm going to use, is the 8601. Here we did the change, but because I did the change on the config mat, if you want to see the changes lively, then you need to basically reapply your daemon sets. All right, so now if I do a ls on this folder where I have all the diverse files from our GitHub repository. So if I want to do this, I just need to basically, I can basically do two things. First, I'm going to kubectl get the daemon set, and we're going to just delete it and reapply it. And he is going to relaunch the pods, and the pods will load the new settings of our Fluentbit. All right, now it's running. So now let's grab one of those those pods, and I'm going to do a kubectl logs to get the logs of this specific pod, and we're going to look at what we have. So here we can see that we have the logs stream that appeared. Now the current format is timestamp. You can see that now the date has been properly been renamed with the desired format. We have a log field equals something, and you have everything stored here in this log. And you can see that we have Kubernetes, the Kubernetes labels has been also added. So we are pretty good here, but let's add a few things here. So the first thing I want to do in this tutorial is basically modify. So in Dynatrace, in the payload, log is not a log format, it's content. So just for the sake of this exercise, I like to rename the potential fields called log to content. So I'm going to use one of those plugins, a filter plugin called modify. So let's edit again the Fluentbit config map, and I'm going to add this one just before we add the labels here in the Kubernetes. Every field called message or log will be renamed into a new field called content. All right, now let's save. Oh, let's save this one. All right, now let's take one of the last of the log streams here. You can see that now log has been renamed into content, so exactly as we wanted to. The other thing that I'd like to do here, you can see that the labels related to Kubernetes are in another level. So see all the labels of Kubernetes are in another object, JSON object, and I would be interested to basically change the hierarchy. So pod name, I want to have it up in the upper to the main JSON object. So I'm going to use for this one another filter called nest. Nest help you to restructure with building a hierarchy in between your objects. All right, so in order to save a bit time here and avoid doing everything with VI, I basically created a small file in this folder called config demo, cm demo. So if you do just a cat, you can see that it's the same one that we had before, but I just added here in my case this nest plugin. I'm using the nests, and I'm asking Fluentbit to say everything which is went through the label. So because all the logs coming from Kubernetes has been adding a tag. So you can see you can add tag here, hosts, or in the previous steps we added the tag for Kubernetes, so which is here. So all the logs coming from the Docker containers, they will be tagged Kubernetes. And here I'd like to modify only the log streams coming from this location, and they will create labels, new attributes with a prefix, which is Kubernetes _. All right, so let's have a look. And now if you look at the new log stream, let's take here so you can see it a bit better. You can see here Kubernetes _namespace, Kubernetes _pod. So basically now the Kubernetes object has disappeared, but all those properties, they are now part of the log stream. I want to rename few of those Kubernetes labels into a Dynatrace format. So then Dynatrace can attach the Kubernetes context to a cluster information that is currently monitored by Dynatrace. So that's the first theme. We use now the Nest plugin. Now, like I said, I basically want to exclude few information. So here I want to grab everything from my logs except the logs from Fluentbit. I'm not interested to collect those because I will probably, if I leave SD out, I will have a duplicated log stream and it doesn't make sense. So to do that again, we are going to use again another plugin, filter plugin, which is the grep plugin. As you can see here, I have added this filter here and I'm using grep. So grep, you can either include extra information, include extra details, or in my case, I said I want to exclude from the log streams, do another cat, and you can see here I use again the filter modify to rename a few of those properties. So here I would like to rename Kubernetes pod name into kubernetes.pod.name. All right, so now you can see that there is some differences. As you can see here, so this is one of the log streams. So let's just select the logs I'm interested in. For example, this one, so content, we have the date, it's an error. And then you can see that the pod name has been renamed. Kubernetes namespace is here. So now I'm starting to have a format that is aligned with the desired Dynatrace Log Ingest API. And you can see here I'm using the HTTP output plugin where I'm using, you have to refer to the active gate because the active gate of Dynatrace would be the one that has the log stream component. So if you want to send an API call to ingest some logs, you have to go through an active gate. If you don't have one, no worries, you can install it in a Linux server or anything like this. So if I do this, what will happen is that the log stream format that we've just modified will be sent out to Dynatrace. So if you don't have any Dynatrace cluster, no worries. For the sake of the exercise, you can start a free trial. Once you have your Dynatrace cluster available, then you will have to deploy Dynatrace. So if I do start installation, I will go for a wizard. So if I want to install the Kubernetes operator in my cluster, I could do it from here. And in my case, you can also deploy a fresh active gate. If you look at the deployment status of my Dynatrace, you can see that I have my active gate running here. And you can see that I have the log component enabled. So I will be able to send log streams to this active gate. So where do you see the logs in Dynatrace? Very easy. So the log streams will be of course, in the observe and explore menu. You have a log section and you can see all the logs appearing. So similar to the LogQL language, you have here a couple of filters. You can select what type of process, what type of events. You can see the log streaming details here. As you can see, it will automatically attach it to a context, which means in other screens, I will have also the logs stream attached, and the Dynatrace Davis AI will basically utilize the logs as well to figure out if there is a problem or not. Otherwise, you can also, similar to the log query, LogQL, you can go to advanced. By doing advanced, instead of clicking here, you can basically create your rules. You say, for example, do I have an example to show you? I can say status equal error. All right, if I run that query, it will basically show me only the logs with the errors, and I can play and add some other filter using the AND or the R operator. I wanted to show you Calyptia. There are a few examples already there, which is great. But otherwise, I can use the builder, and the builder will guide me and say, I want to have an input, and you can click. So in my case, you remember we were using tail. Otherwise, in my case, I don't need it. I already have it in my editor, so I can just do this, and I can validate. And this will basically, first of all, look at if there's no issue in the syntax of your configuration. Here, it will basically visualize your own pipeline. So I really like the Calyptra in a sense where it's basically guide you in building your pipeline. So if you are a bit lost and you don't know how to start, I think the Calyptra would be a good way to be guided, at least in your process on building things.
All right, that's it for today's episode. So I think we learned quite a lot of things today. I try to focus a bit more on how to build a log stream pipeline with Fluentbit. So you can see there is obviously a lot of different options and a lot of plugins to allow you to transform and add more labels to your log streams with the help of those plugins. So we took the example of sending the log stream with the output HTTP to send it to the Log Ingest API of Dynatrace, but we could also have sent it to the forwarder to FluentD, and FluentD could also have sent it out to Dynatrace. All right, so if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, to subscribe to this channel, and also if you want us to cover specific technology that you like to have a tutorial, don't hesitate to let us know. I'm always happy to get new ideas from you guys. All right, so stay tuned for another episode. See you soon.